I'd like to welcome Jacqueline Houghton from University of Leeds. She's our first speaker this afternoon, who's speaking about teaching field skills in a virtual world.
Okay, thank you. Right, my name's Jacqueline Houghton, so University of Leeds. We've been kind of slightly by accident looking at field skills and using them in a virtual world. It's a team of us. We've got Jeff Lloyd, Claire Gordon, and then Annabeth Robinson, you see there, is actually from Leeds College of Art. So we've got a collaboration between our science department and an art department, which is really quite nice. So these are all scenes, by the way, from our virtual world that we've created. So, as I say, we've got this collaboration. It was a pure fluke that this happened. One of my colleagues was talking with a lady in an allotment and happened to mention that she was a geologist and that we were looking at this. It was a web-based exercise originally that we had, a mapping project kind of exercise, and that we were looking to update it, trying to do something a bit new on the web, you know, maybe have a few more buttons to click or a film to play or something. And Annabeth happened to mention that she was a lecturer in video studies, animation, gamification in education, and that she had this really good idea, this really good piece of software, that she could create this virtual landscape, this virtual fieldwork that we were talking about, just as a sort of simple little website. So we thought, well, that's great. Well, let's give it a go. And what she used is something called the Unity game engine, or the game ecosystem. It's software that is free for the sort of basic download, and then after that you go professional. But it's actually used to create a lot of well-known computer games. Assassin's Creed is made using this software, and various others, I think Call of Duty, maybe. So it's actually professional game software that we're using, that Annabeth happened to be an expert in. The stage we're at is we've got our virtual world is live and running. That's the link there. You can go on and have a look at it. It has some various flaws that we're working on, but it's open to anybody to have a look and have a go. So what we've called it, we had to think about this, what we're going to call it. We decided it was going to be a virtual training environment. Okay, we struggled lots with names. Obviously, virtual learning environment has already gone. So we came up with VTE, virtual training environment, and we plan to make lots of them over time. It's going to take a little while. But our first one is this geological mapping and field skills virtual training environment. And we have this virtual landscape, you can see here, and there's outcrops within it. They're just these fairly generic grey lumps of rock at the moment. Again, that's something we're working on to make these look more realistic. But students are free to roam. You go in to the game and you just wander around. Anywhere you like, stroll up to any outcrop you want, give it a click, and a notebook flicks up. I'll be showing you hopefully a film of this in a moment. Notebook flicks up with all sorts of data that you collect in the field, the lithology, bedding readings, cleavage reading, little description of the outcrop locality. And the aim of it is that the student uses this to create a field slip, or to make a geological map on a field slip. One of the first things I have to say here, it's not a replacement for fieldwork. In the context of this meeting, there may be a few students that actually it is a replacement for fieldwork, but it's not real fieldwork. It's a training ground, if you like, for fieldwork. Because what we tend to find is finance departments go, oh, good, can you get rid of fieldwork? Oh, that's brilliant, it's going to save us so much money. It's like, no. It is not that at all. It is a training environment. It's somewhere to learn these basic mapping skills. I always like to say it occupies a sort of virtual space between the classroom and the field. We use it in the classroom. That is what it's designed for, as a classroom activity. Students have a paper, piece of paper as a field slip. They're taking information from the screen and putting it on to the field slip. But you're learning the sort of skills that normally, certainly in the past, we've taught in the field, in the wind and the rain and the midges, and with students splitting up to go off so you can't check up on what they're doing. And it's those sort of skills that we can teach using this virtual landscape. And obviously the interest here is that we can use it for students who can't otherwise get into the field, to give them a flavour of field work, but to provide a reasonable alternative assessment. All our field trips are assessed, whether it's by posters when you're out there, notebooks, field reports, talks. All field work is assessed in one way or another. And normally a student that can't go on a field trip is given a poster on the regional geology or a literature review on the regional geology of where you're going, which is fine because there is a little bit sort of, well, what else do you do? We need a number at the end of this to give the student, we need a mark for them in some way, but it's not really ticking any of the boxes for the learning outcomes or the experience for that student that they would otherwise get on field work. So what we've got about 137 outcrops. It's really quite a large area. If you were to map it properly, as I have done, it takes about a day and a half. Obviously, this is rather longer than you actually need in your average field class, so we've ended up tending to use just little bits of it, small areas. As I say, the students plot the data directly on their field slips, so it's this sort of combination, virtual world, real world mapping. Ideally, they record the information from the notebook that comes up on screen. I say ideally because they often don't, but they need that information really as they find out as they go on. But then they can make an informed decision about where to go next. They can look at their bedding reading, they can be on a boundary and they go, well, actually, I need to go that way to find the next, the next sort of section of this boundary. So they're able to make decisions that they would be making if they were in the field. Right, okay, so this is hopefully the first film. Not quite sure how this is going to work. Ah, there we go. Right, this is the scary lady. This is kind of the opening shot from the virtual world. I don't like scary lady. I call her scary lady because I find her scary. As you can hear, we have sound effects, so you'll notice these as we go along. But this is a view of the world. We've got valleys, we've got the sea further out, we've got the wind farm up at the top of the hill. And the idea is that you just, as I say, just walk along. There we go. It's a little bit jumpy, the film. It does work on almost any sort of computer, but I think the combination of trying to record it off my screen has made it a little bit jumpy. You get right up close to the outcrop, you click G, your GPS comes up with your grid references, and then you click on the outcrop itself, and up you can hear the page flicking as you open the notebook. And this is the sort of information that we have up there. Little outcrop description of the rocks, in this case just a bedding reading. But obviously, what's key in this particular outcrop is it's got a nice big fault. That's the RAF. We tried to replicate the field experience as much as possible to make it an immersive experience. And that includes all these sound effects. It gets really irritating after a while. It's on a loop of about 8 to 15 minutes, that sound, and it really winds you up after a while. But you can see the sort of information we have here. You've got the details of the fault, the different rock types on either side. And we got the next, we've had a little bit of issues with these films. But it's all information that the students can record in their own notebooks that's sitting beside them on the table. We got the next film. I embedded them in the PowerPoint. This was a big mistake. It's caused all sorts of issues. So one of the things about the virtual world is we now have the seagulls very loudly, is we've tried to keep it realistic. You're restricted to a walking pace, quite a fast walk, but it's part of the planning. You can't just teleport around to find the outcrops you want. You're restricted in time in that you're walking along at a certain speed, you don't want to be hopping around from one end of the field area to another. But that said, it does take several minutes to walk from one end of the field area to the other. So our concession are these 2 minibuses from the northeast to the southwest corner. You can teleport from one end of the field area to the other. But for the rest of the time, you do actually have to walk, and it can get quite dull. I know this because I spend a lot of time in this world. So you get a flavour for the area there. Have we got the next one? No, that's the first one. Oh, there we go. This is the last one. Again, you can't cross rivers just anywhere. It's like the real world. You have to go across the bridges. This is one of my favourite views, just up the gorge. Have a look through there. There is a reason I've come over to this area, as you'll see as we get there. We've got a couple of outcrops that are quite close together. I'm going back information that students need. A key point here is the limestone, the burrows, are actually showing that those rocks are the right way up. So it's about them trying to make these observations and convince them that they need to make these observations. Because when you come only a short way over and you look at this outcrop, you find things have changed now. We've got a lot of cleavage development. The burrows are now inverted, those beds are upside down, and they're sheared. So clearly we've come across a boundary, not necessarily seen the boundary itself, but you need to go look for it. And then the final thing that we've got on here is what's called one of our little Easter eggs, and it did make me laugh when Angela mentioned the dead sheep, because here is our dead sheep, complete with flies and sound effects, and it's what everybody remembers. At the open day, we've had professors come up and go, "Oh, where's your dead sheep? I hear there's a dead sheep." When students hear there's a dead sheep, they get into this walk, "Where's the dead sheep?" I said, "Well, you have to go and find it." So it's all right, we don't need that one again. Okay, so that's an idea. How do I get the... That is one we haven't got to yet. We haven't been able to get smell-o-vision on here. So that gives you an idea of what our virtual world looks like. So the kind of things that we're getting students to do within it, the sort of, if you like, the learning outcomes that we're looking at, obviously, just plotting grid references on a map. It sounds straightforward, but it goes wrong so many times. Taking the bedding readings, compass clino, set up the strike, onto your field slip, draw it on. These are skills that, if you're going to spend, 2 hours in the virtual world, you're going to plot quite a lot of bedding readings or cleavage readings. You're getting used to it. It's becoming a habit of how to do that, how to get it right. Something that previously, really, we mainly did in the field, or a fairly sort of basic in-class kind of exercise. And then interpreting their data, and there I've put in there really deliberately, because they are collecting the data. I know they're not measuring it, but they're plotting it on with grid references. It can go wrong. But it is their data that they have in a way collected. And then it's encouraging them to use things like structure contours or strike lines and go, look, it really does work. If you plot these on, you can do it in the comfort of your own classroom. You can construct the boundaries. There's no need to just gaze, draw a line through the field slip. Use these techniques that we're teaching you, that they really are useful. And also, of course, looking at, outcrop patterns. The maps that we base, that we use in the virtual world have all been constructed using structure contours. It's the easiest way to do it, basically. So it's getting the students to work out, once they've got these coloured dots on, what techniques are you going to use to create that field slip? As I said earlier, sort of rehearsing the decision-making skills as to where to go next, trying to persuade them to actually put that boundary on the map, because it will be useful, as you're going along. And probably one of the most important things, thinking in 3D, that flat field slip to this clearly 3D landscape that you're looking at, making that connection between contours that are close together and steep hills. And also, what's that doing for the outcrop patterns that you're seeing? I had a student who was happily working along the coast, shale, 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 and she says, "Jackie, I found quartzite." "Well, what's quartzite doing here?" And she was just looking at a map. And I said, "Well, come on, we'll walk along this hill." And I said, "Now you're standing here, your quartzite's down there in that valley. can you see, yeah, the shale's running along the hill, but your quartzite is down beneath the shale. And it was a real one of those light bulb moments. Sort of, oh, I get it. Oh, I see. And that's great that, we were able to do that in the classroom, because that's, helping them see when they get in the field that relationship between your field slip and the landscape that you're looking at. And then at the end, we're getting them to construct a geological map, a cross-section with that strat column, all from the data that they've collected in this virtual world. So what we found in class, as you can see, the students have been very enthusiastic. This guy really did turn up in a high-vis and a hard hat. We did not pay him, I promise you. He came like that, and I was like, get a picture of him quick before he realises what an idiot he looks. And I hope he's not watching this, because we were really happy with him, really. I was surprised for the video generation, if you like, the gaming generation, how keen they were to get in there and have a go. Comments like, I'm enjoying this more than is natural, and things like that were coming back at us. And what we found compared to the field was that in the field, students like to just write in their notebooks. It's nice and easy, it's small to hold. We'll put the data on the map later, back at the hostel, back in the pub. But in the classroom setting, with the field slip in front of them, they were quite happy to plot the data on the map. But what they didn't do was then record the data in the notebooks. And as I said, there's important information in there. When they were later on trying to draw their cross sections, they couldn't work out why they were seeing a change in dip. It didn't seem to work. And it's like, well, if you'd paid attention to the notebook entry, you'd have seen those beds were overturned. And actually, it makes perfect sense for the folding around there. Now, in the real world, when they do that, we can't send them back to trek across the marsh and the hill to get to that outcrop to double check the information they didn't get. But of course, in this world, we can. We can send them back, go and have a look at that, right? That information is there. You need to get it. You need to, put it into the cross-section. And actually, if you'd been sketching that cross-section as you'd gone along, you'd have seen that straight away, that something had changed. We tell you these things for a reason. It is to help you, and it's trying to get that message across. And actually, that comes on to what I've said about outcrop capture there, that other habit of dashing around, getting everything on the map as fast as possible, and we'll interpret it later. When there's a little group of us in the pub with a beer, we'll interpret all the boundaries and everything then. And it's persuading them that that's not a good idea, that actually if you do it in the field, it's all so much easier. You can just go and check that rock again really easily, or you can see the change in vegetation or whatever. And that's what we saw happening in the classroom, which was great, because I was talking to students and going, look, really, there is a reason we're saying this. And they were going, yeah, okay, I believe you, Jackie, don't just leave us alone. But hopefully that will translate into them actually, using the information we give them in the field and maybe thinking about the geology rather than just trying to get outcrops on the map as fast as possible. The group we were trialling this with have just gone to Assynt on their mapping trip. So we're waiting to see how they do in the field, having done this exercise before going. So that's what we can do in the virtual world. There's quite a few things that we can't do, and why it's not a replacement for field work. You can't take readings. You can't take the decisions that you need to make around taking readings, like, where is bedding? Is that a joint? Is that a bed? You can't do that in the virtual world. It's difficult to get that sort of full interaction between the geology and the landscape. We are working on it, but it's hard to get that really across. And also the natural sort of variability of the rocks. There's a limit to what we can put in those notebooks without really bogging progress down. And you can't replicate the social side of a field trip, which is actually really quite important. And I was kind of pleased that people were talking about this earlier on, because for the majority of our students, that won't be important. But for those that can't go on field work, the social side is actually something they don't realise they're missing out on until too late. We have a student who she has chronic pain syndrome, which means she is unlikely to do any field work, although we are working on it. And after all her cohort came back from their first field trip to Pembroke, she was saying, oh, I can really see the difference. There's lots of friends groups that weren't there before. There's a buzz about the group that wasn't there before they went on this field trip. And, I was sad on her behalf. I wish if we'd known that before, perhaps we might have encouraged her a little bit more, tried to put things in place for her to go. because that social aspect is really quite a part of the experience as well. So what we've done is we've set up what I was saying about the alternative assessments. Our student really won't go to Assynt. It's a 2-week trip. As you know, it's northwest Scotland. It's a long coach journey. The hostel style accommodation, although great for large groups. It's bed and breakfast, you have to cook your own meals, it's quite squashed, and it's a physically demanding trip. Just from that photograph you get an idea of the topography and the weather conditions that we see on the trip. And for many students, they're just simply not going to get to those locations that everybody else is looking at. And I think one of the things, again, that's come out from what people are saying this morning, for students with any sort of disability, or even some of us who haven't got a disability but maybe get migraines or something, that not being in control of what is going on in your surroundings when you're on a field trip can make it very daunting, and it can make it very difficult to manage symptoms, which is one of the reasons, particularly the student I'm thinking of didn't want to go on that first field trip because she was just worried about managing her condition. So what we've done with our virtual field trip is we've taken the same landscape, put a new geology on it, put a geology that's based on the Assynt area, so it's the geology that her cohort is seeing. Instead of saying this is a limestone or this is a sandstone, we've now got this is rock type H, and there is a hand specimen behind you on the bench that you need to describe. So she's got a long line of hand specimens on the bench that she's going to be describing as part of her field work. We've got some thin sections as well. Some photographs to give a feeling of what the trip looks like. This is from the Fucoid beds, those who know the area. Some field exercises, by which I mean we've got a strain analysis, some paleocurrent data that she can work with. And what we discovered very late on in the day is using Street View on Google Earth, which is like its whole other virtual world. This is the notebook that she's got. We've jazzed it up a little bit. We've made the text bigger for starters, which needed doing with the original version. She's got things like the outcrop description. We've put some amusing little comments in there about members of staff that she knows. Generally, it's them doing things like press-ups, that kind of thing. But in this case, it's me getting excited about nonconformity. And again, you can see the field sketch. She needs to take information from that about that style of unconformity. These are some of the photographs that we're using from the area. A little bit short on time, but they give her a flavour of the outcrops, what they really look like, as opposed to these virtual grey blobs that she's seeing. We've used Google Earth. This is a slightly old version in that you needed to click on the photographs and they would take you on a virtual tour of the area. But then, as I say, we discovered Street View, and this is this same outcrop, or very closely related. We have the Lewisian in the foreground and the Torridonian in the background. We were able to take her on the exact road that all her friends will be walking down as their first day on the field trip. We walked her down the same road, pointing out, talking about the different rock types, not overly telling her what they were, but just pointing out where they changed. And as you go down Street View, you now see the Torridonian is now at road level. As you keep going, you get the Torridonian against Lewisian. You're seeing that unconformity, that landscape of the Lewisian. Just seeing that as you drive down on Street View. It's great. We haven't even scratched the surface, I don't think, of what we can do with Street View. It's a whole nother sort of virtual world that we can use. And this view across the loch, obviously we've got better photos of this, but that's not the point. To get to this view, you've had to walk a long way down the road. All the time you're going over the same rock type, going over Torridonian. You're getting a feel for that area in a way that no photograph, no field slip is going to show you. So we think Street View is great. But that's not going to get our student on their field trip or the social side of the field trip. So we came up with this idea that we could have like a hybrid field trip, where we have field trips where you have suitable accommodation for a disabled student, whatever that might be. somewhere there are localities, that, at least some of the localities that they can get to, that they can access, that we would then create the localities that they can't get to. We'll create virtual mock-ups for, so they can do this sort of hybrid version of the days when they can go in the field, even if it's only for part of the day. They can go in the field, they can get a feel of what the area looks like. For the days when they can't, they can go in the virtual world and gather the data. Hopefully, if we can get it right, they can contribute to group work in the evenings, feel a part of their cohort and participate in the social aspects of the field work. So that's kind of our, what we're hoping is, I'll just step back a second, what we're hoping will be our sort of perfect model that we can get students at least partly out into the field. Unfortunately, our student who's currently working on her alternative Assynt has difficulty managing her symptoms, so we're not sure if this will work for her. But what we'll do is we'll get it in place for a field trip next Easter, and we'll just have to see how she goes. And if she can go, we'll support her with everything we can. And if she can't, well, we've still got the virtual world that she can have a look at. So, questions? Anything people would like to know?
It's not really a question, but you're saying you're showing the you're saying go back to the field notebook, and there's certain information you've written down in the field notebook.
There we go. That's the.
I think telling them to go and find relevant information in the field notebook reminds them, teaches them quite how important it is to record all of this stuff in their field notebook. They need to learn what's important to put in there.
Yes, we were quite surprised actually how much we thought you could get out of this exercise as we've been watching students, you know, do this in the classroom. It's like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought they'll get that out of it, or they can do this, or we need to improve that.
Okay. Hi, I'm Simon Ward from the Field Studies Council. I'm just in sort of, I think what we had a big sort of celebration last year for our 70th anniversary, and one of the main points for the next 70 years, we were saying the incorporation of ICT and use of all of these things in fieldwork, which is fantastic. With the launch of things like Google Expeditions, which is going to come out soon, and obviously with tablets, and teachers can sit there with a tablet and have 30 smartphones with that on there, is the possibility of making access to all for the students that might not be able to get into the field, possibly therefore going to limit access to those that normally might have the opportunity?
What you mean, having something like this will stop students
do you actually start to
going
limit with a more cost-effective and this sort of thing? Actually, I know you're saying it's not replacing fieldwork, but at school level, A level, it could, and therefore they don't have those skills going into undergraduate levels. So that
is potentially a problem with it. I mean, as geologists, we can go on and on why it isn't a replacement for fieldwork, and you know, geologists will understand that, and it's trying to make it clear what fieldwork is, what can be gained from fieldwork that you won't get from this sort of world. So yes, that is a danger, but it's kind of also not a reason not to do it. And it's just a case of keep making that point. I say it's like the rehearsal room for the actor. It's not the stage, you know, or the battleground. It's not the war, if you like. I keep making that point always, that it's a training exercise. It's not the real thing. So that's kind of all we can do, really.
How long does it take to build this world?
Ah, right, yes. It's this took a long time because it was a really steep learning curve. We encountered all sorts of problems with it. A smaller world is relatively quick. Potentially, we could probably do it in weeks, but that means people not doing. It means Annabeth, our programmer, being available and being able to sort of focus on it. It is surprisingly quick. What really takes the time is the virtual side of it doesn't take that long. Constructing a realistic geological map that works with, you know, cross sections that work with the landscape is very time consuming. And drawing all these sketches, I'm very good in Adobe Illustrator now, that kind of thing. So absolute minimum in weeks. More realistically, it's months, but we're getting faster at it. So.
And so I guess following on from that, like, is this accessible to, because I know you've got the website, is it accessible to everybody, or is it accessible to just your students? If it's accessible to everybody, how do you see the funding of that if it was to be rolled out further? Like, would the funding carry, like, would the university be able to justify? I know Leeds is very big on the MOOCs. Is it under the same banner as the MOOCs?
No, it's not related to the MOOCs at all. What we've done, this is completely open. Anyone can go on here. There's the field slip is there. You can download that. I believe it's already being used in a couple of other universities. We have many ideas for other worlds, some of which will be freely available. We'd like to do a schools version, just a very simplified a field slip that's already perhaps got the outcrops marked on it. So a little bit a case of going around and collecting the rock data, colouring it in, and then working out where your boundary will go. If we do that, it will be freely available. You'll have noticed this is branded up. The minibuses have Leeds logo on it. The full front page with the instructions has the Leeds logo on it. So it'll be a mix. It's work in progress. We're putting, we can keep our costs down a little bit by trying to keep it in-house, by not using a company to do it. With the lady at Leeds College of Art, it's very useful for her to have her skills used in the scientific context, so she's happy to work for mates rates kind of thing. So it's a mix. Some of our plans we will be keeping in-house, but we do plan to open up others to be freely available on the web.
You said geologists would understand the difference between, you know, this and the real, what you gain in real field trips. So I'm not a geologist, I work in student services, so I kind of am questioning to what extent could we in future offer degrees where people do, you know, the entirety of their learning demonstrate the same skills without actually lowering the academic content of a degree through virtual learning?
One of the key things you can't do in the virtual world is actually take measurements of the rocks for yourself. You can't take your compass Klein out and go up to a rock and go, right, that's where my bedding is, or this is where my fault is. Get your compass Klein on then, take the measurements. You can't make that interpretation. All these field sketches are interpretations in themselves. It can't replace going up to an outcrop, looking at it, deciding where to take that measurement, sketching it, and as you sketch it, you realise, oh, that's interesting, actually that does that does this. You can't replace that in this world because a photograph or a sketch of an outcrop can't do that. You need to be there in the field, looking at the rock, getting your hands on the rock, tasting it, you know, how silty is this shale, all that sort of thing. So it's particularly that interpretation of the rocks you cannot get from this. You can get the sort of mechanical how to plot things on a field slip, what decisions you need to make in the field, sorry, excuse me, and why, when you're trying to draw your cross section or whatever, but you're not doing that real basic skill of a geologist of interpreting the rocks for yourself. Would be the main thing that I've come to with that.
I think we do probably need to move on. I'm sure Jackie will be delighted to answer further questions over coffee if people have them. So thank you very much, Jackie.